Hi guys, Victoria here. Before we get to the podcast, I wanted to be sure you knew about the free online starter course we have available at the Victoria Stilwell Academy called Building Your Dog's Confidence. You can enroll for free anytime from anywhere. So whether you're looking for advice about your dog or you're wanting to test drive VSA before enrolling in one of our professional learning experiences, visit vsdogtrainingacademy.com now to get your free course. That's vsdogtrainingacademy.com. And now, on to the podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. I have a great guest today. Her name is Maia Huff-Owen. And so I don't get it wrong, I'm going to look at her bio because I want to make sure that I have everything right because there's a lot. She's a university lecturer in philosophy of science, a passionate student of animal behavior, a graduate of the Karen Pryor Academy, a co-instructor for Melina De Martini's Separation Anxiety Certification Program, a faculty advisor for the Victoria Stilwell Academy, and a content and relationship manager at Positively and VSA. And okay, as well as all that, Maia, because that's a lot, right? It's like, I don't know when you sleep. But you grew up, and this is what I didn't know about you. I mean, I've spoken to you a lot because, of course, we work together. But I didn't know you grew up on a working cow and calf ranch in Hawaii.
Yes, that's right. My first exposure to living with animals was working on a cattle operation, and it was a cow and calf operation, which for those who know livestock means that those animals stay with us for a long time. Those cows are there for their whole natural life. And the landscape is such that in Hawaii that it's quite volcanic. So we can't use ATVs or drones effectively to move livestock. We really use dogs and horses still because the terrain is just too rough. So that was my first exposure to animals and to dogs, really, was in a working context.
So you did you have to, as in herd on horseback as well? So were you working the dogs and herding on horseback?
Yes, although I was a super horse-focused kid to the point where I actually quit high school to ride semi-professionally and then went and finished after that. But there were dogs around, but I have to confess that I was so focused on the horses as a child and as a teenager and a young adult that I didn't really pay that much attention to what the dogs were doing. And it wasn't until later when I had my own dogs as an adult that I started to think back to the dogs that I had shared those experiences with and just how extraordinary they were too.
Talk about shared experiences because when I was very young, I was 6 years old, my parents took us on vacation to Wales. And it was a working farm. It was this big manor house, but it was also a working farm. And it was a huge sheep farm. And they had some cattle, but huge. I mean, thousands and thousands of acres over the Welsh mountains. Beautiful. And so we're there to go and enjoy this 2-week vacation. And all I did was ride horses because they had a whole load of horses to ride. So I rode horses. And then I started going around with the farmer. Well, of course, because of it being a sheep farm, he would take the kids with him and we'd ride in the back of the Jeep. And I became really fascinated because behind us, there were 2 border collies. And for me to watch him, even at that young age, to watch him work those border collies, well, that was it. All I wanted to do every single vacation for Easter and for summertime was to go back to Pantuderi and ride around with Max Jones. And so we went 13 times. And as I grew up, that's when I was a reasonably okay horse person. I mean, relatively chaotic on this Welsh mountain pony, bombing around the Welsh mountains, So no finesse, but I managed to stay on somehow. And anyway, so then we didn't only use the dogs to herd, we also, or the Jeep, we were also on horseback. So I learned to work the dogs a little bit, but also to do some herding, corralling. I don't know exactly what you call it.
Yeah.
But it was that was my exposure, my introduction to horsemanship, but also to border collies.
I love that. And just on a personal note, my last couple of years with the dog, who's you can see behind me, actually has been learning to herd sheep together. And it's a new experience for me. And gosh, does it look, when it's smooth, it looks instinctual. It looks easy. It looks like everyone's born knowing how to do it. But I have learned, and this is part of the fascination of it for me, that it really isn't any of those things. It is a complicated and careful dance and conversation. But when it's done well, gosh, is it beautiful? I find it so beautiful. So that's part
Well,
of the deal.
yeah, I like the fact that you're actually, you've got this beautiful border collie, and you're actually allowing your dog to do what your dog instinctively, well, it was bred to do it, but which they're still pretty good at it, whether they are brought up to do the job or not.
Yes, although in this particular case, this dog came to me from working dog lines, but he came to me because he wouldn't work. That's what they were, that he was uninterested in work, and that he didn't have any drive, that he had no herding instinct. That was part of the reason that he was passed along. And I'm his fourth home, and got him at just over a year old. So he had many chances to work before he came to me. It turned out that the environmental setup wasn't appropriate for his needs. Once we changed how we taught it, and he's had to learn from me, a total novice. We've had to learn together. So I wouldn't say that it's been a beautiful or perfect setup for him. But once we started to have that conversation, in what circumstances might you be interested in herding? Then he really blossomed. So for me, it's another case where we could say it's in the dog, but I would prefer to say it's in the environment. It's in the setup. And, perhaps that's a false dichotomy. Certainly in his case, he's a washout, but I'll just brag on him for a second. He just won our regional border collie herding championships. So,
Wow.
yeah.
And I think that really shows that, of course, we have to see dogs as individuals. So just because he is a border collie doesn't mean to say that he is going to be great at this particular thing. But that just shows how important it is that of how the environment that we create for our dogs, and to understand why our dog might not be working or responding in the way that we want. Maybe it just doesn't tick their boxes. There's no real motivation to do it. There's something within the environment that they can't get past. And yet, in my experience, it seems with clients that I work with, that the blame is often put on the dog. And the dog's misbehaving, and the dog is not doing this, and the dog is not listening. When actually, when you're talking about having a conversation, so rather than blaming, it should be more of a conversation to find out why. So what was it? What was it with your dog that was sort of inhibiting that beautiful ability of his? And now he's a champion.
Yeah. So what I think it was is that he didn't have the requisite skills. He didn't know how to access reinforcement in that environment. And what that meant was that he often would chase sheep, or he would run out to the edge of the field, or he might eat sheep poop, or he might look for reinforcement in other places. And of course, that's not the goal of herding. None of those are the goal of herding.
So not.
And so what he and I ended up doing was, away from sheep, learning the basic skills. How do you circle? How do you change your shoulder movement so that you can move around the back of the sheep? What does a stop look like? How to slow down, and building those communication systems in a positive way away from sheep. Because he wasn't willing to push through a lot of punishment that comes with traditional herding, which is how he might have learned those things from a traditional trainer, he just shut down in the sheep environment. But once he had those component skills that were gained in a positive environment, and we went back out to see sheep, well, now we had a communication system, and we could work on the game without me ever having to shut him down, push him out, or correct him, if you will, out there. So, well,
that I think, so this is in a herding environment, right? But if we could take all of that knowledge, that conversation, and let's look at leash walking, walking well on the leash, having good leash manners. So many dogs pull on the leash. So many dogs are very reactive on the leash, and that's its own thing. But I want to talk about people that have issues with their dogs pulling on the leash. And they can't teach them for love nor money. It's really difficult. Dog's not listening outside. How can you use some of that knowledge that you have found out and discovered between you, that conversation, out on a general leash walk?
Yeah. And I was joking with a trainer friend of mine. She made a joke that we should have a book called Loose Leash Walking in Just 2 Years, right? So I don't want to oversimplify it, that there are many, many component skills that may go into learning to walk well on the leash. And those skills are not just on the dog side. They may be on the human side as well. In fact, they are on the human side as well. This friend, her name is Kiki Yablon. She actually gave a great leash walking presentation at APDT. And I would encourage anyone to check that out if they're thinking about this. Because I think once you focus on your own component skills, how do you hold the leash? Where are you going to deliver reinforcement to that dog, whether that's allowing them to sniff or whether it's tossing a treat or delivering a treat? When are you going to withhold it? Are you going to turn around or stop? Do you want to do that? Are there other alternatives to doing that? When you start to focus on your behavior, on your side of the leash, and you start working with that individual dog, how do you feel about this? Might this work? That conversation can go back and forth, and you can build those component skills on both sides so you can have a leash walk that is not so frustrating for either of you.
Let's look at the person then that doesn't really have the time to do that. Could you teach it in a day? In an hour session?
I don't think that when it comes to leash walking, that depending on your goals, that you can produce a perfect heel in every dog in a day. But I do think that oftentimes when we talk to people, maybe not always, but oftentimes when we speak to people about what their goals are, and we get clearer about their goals, we can then investigate, well, what skills do you already have? What skills does your dog already have? And oftentimes we can make big improvements in a single session. Sometimes those are equipment changes. It may be that they're currently walking the dog on a 5-foot lead, and it may be that putting that dog on a 10-foot lead gets to the point where we really improve how much time is spent with that leash tight. So sometimes we might have equipment changes that can help us get there. Another thing that I think can really help us get there is figuring out how we're going to deliver reinforcement for the behavior that we want. And that's part of what I'd like to talk about, and part of what I was thinking about in this conversation around Beyond the Click is there are times where our reinforcement placement can help us get there much faster and be clearer to the animal. And there are certainly times where our reinforcement placement is working against us. So, for instance, in that leash walking example, if we're always feeding for turning around, stopping, and feeding the dog for returning to us, we may end up with a yo-yo dog, a dog that goes faster and faster and faster and faster, but is really hitting the end of that leash quite often. Again, I learned this from Kiki, but if in her leash walking talk, but if we toss the treat 45 degrees out to the side into the grass, and the dog is off there eating that treat, and we walk forward, well, now the dog can catch up to us, and we can toss the treat back off into the grass. Well, here we're getting many, many steps, many good steps of loose leash walking simply by changing where we're delivering that treat.
So, I love it. I do you know, just, sorry to interrupt. I love that. And it's a technique as well that I think is really quite simple to use when you know how to do it, and translates well to teaching clients to do the same. And you are speaking at the conference for everybody. The conference is April the 21st to the 23rd. Register now so you can hear Maia talk, and we have some other fantastic speakers as well. And you go to dogbehaviorconference.com to sign up. But You're speaking about, as you said, after the click, completing the training picture. So we're talking about really focusing not so much on what the dog is doing, obviously that's important, but what you're doing and how you can make what you do easier for the dog to understand and respond to.
Absolutely. And particularly, I want to focus on the C and the ABC. So if we have antecedents, behaviors, and consequences, if we have the leash walking environment, we have the dog walking on leash, and we want to reinforce leash behavior that we like in that example, I want to focus on that third piece, that consequence picture. It's not the only way that we can make training easier, but I really do think that that's the question. How can we make training easier? And for me, I think I've never changed a dog's behavior, not my own dog's behavior, not a client's dog's behavior. I have changed my behavior so that their behavior changes. I cannot control another being's behavior. So when I think about clients too, I think about what skills can I give them such that their dog's behavior aligns more with their goals. And a lot of those skills, I think, are reinforcement placement. And this is kind of a theoretical pitch for mechanics. And I know that mechanics aren't everyone's favorite topic in the world.
No, I have to admit they're not my favorite topic. I have to say, when we teach at VSA, and then we have great faculty as well that teach, and they do the mechanics of it. And for me, that's like it vitally important. You have to know how to do it. It is the very foundation. You have to know. But I'm just such like, I just want to problem solve. I just want to do this and that. I don't really care about mechanics. But it is important. So sorry to interrupt you. But yes. Yeah, it does kind of makes me feel like, when you talk about training mechanics.
Yes, okay. I know. And I think part of that is the way that we've taught mechanics. I'm guilty of this as well. I mean, how much fun is it to do a dress rehearsal of your training system without your animal there, right? But one of the things that I think about here is that when we do that, we are clearer for our animals and we are kinder to them too. I think one of the ways we've talked about mechanics that probably hasn't helped, and I'm hoping to go away from this, is to talk about mechanics in terms of being really precise and very speedy. For instance, having perfect timing, being really precise and very speedy. And those things can be valuable, but they aren't the only way to get a clean, clear reinforcement loop. This is something that I will say that this has been a meditation for me that is currently part of a conversation I'm having with the wonderful Mary Hunter, who teaches reinforcement systems classes. And I've learned a lot from her about thinking about speed and accuracy as maybe not the most important goals in reinforcement delivery. So just as a practical example, if we have a client who's struggling to feed fast enough, right? We've all heard, the rate of reinforcement, we have to keep that rate high. We have to keep that rate high. If we have a client who's struggling to get those treats out and get them to their dog fast enough and the dog is getting frustrated, can we give them a bigger, crunchier treat? If we give them a bigger, crunchier treat, now the client can reach, grab the treat, and the dog is eating for the next 5 to 10 seconds, while the client can reset and relax. So nobody's scrambling here anymore. That's the kind of thing that I think about when I think about reinforcement, are there ways to make it easier and really draw on the strengths of the team that you're working with for the behaviors that you want, so nobody's frustrated.
I'm talking to Maia Huff-Owen, and we've got more to talk about after the click, completing the training picture after this message. We will be back.
Looking to take your dog training skills to the next level and turn your passion into a profession? Check out the Victoria Stilwell Academy for Dog Training and Behaviors professional courses and make your dream of working with animals for a living a reality. With courses ranging from free starter options to the popular Fundamentals course and even VSA's flagship Professional Dog Trainer course, there are options available for every skill level and every type of learner. Want to learn online at your own pace? All of VSA's courses are learner-centered, performance-based experiences designed using the latest concepts in the field of human adult learning to provide maximum efficiency and get you started quickly with a powerful tool set in your arsenal. Want a more customized learning experience? VSA's flagship dog trainer course also provides a premium add-on option which allows you to get the ultimate package. Connect with fellow students in a small private class that meets regularly for live private coaching and support-based meetups. Benefit from shadowing a local mentor in your area, and also attend multiple virtual and in-person learning intensives, obviously only when it's safe and practical to do so. Forget about watching another repurposed webinar or a recorded live event. All of VSA's content is fresh, new, and purpose-built to deliver an unparalleled learning experience. Plus, all dog trainer course students, whether online only or those also in the add-on in-person track, are provided with a dedicated faculty advisor to help mentor you through your course experience every step of the way. During these times of COVID, there are online course options springing up everywhere you turn. But VSA has been delivering its state-of-the-art learning content for years and leading the field with its commitment not just to giving you great material, but delivering it via a powerful learning system custom designed to help you learn and apply what you need to know to give you the skills, the knowledge, and the confidence to change the lives of people and dogs. So join the VSA family today and find out which path is right for you. Learn more and enroll in a free starter course today at vsdogtrainingacademy.com. That's vsdogtrainingacademy.com. Join us at the Victoria Stilwell Academy, the future of dog training.
I'm back with Maia Huff-Owen, and we're talking about reinforcement, how to deliver it, when to deliver it, and the different ways that we can deliver it. So let's take a look. When we're talking about reinforcement, we're talking about food here, and I do want to talk about toys in a minute, but focusing on food. So let's say, for example, I mean, there's many trainers that, myself included, that like to give ourselves a little space by throwing food in the on the ground. So the dog goes to get the food. We can have a little bit of space, and then the dog comes back to us. We call it a reset, but actually it's not really a reset. It's just part of the flow. What do you think about that?
I think that's a very useful tool and an example of using reinforcement placement to set you both up again for the next rep. One thing that I think about, so if we think about that ABC, it sounds like behavior is only happening in B, right? The dog is doing the thing in B, but of course, behavior is happening in C too, and in A. And I just want to focus on, well, what are you doing in C? That is a conversation too. Your animal does something, you do something. You throw the treats on the ground, your animal walks to the treats, you step back from the treats, you maybe put your hands back down in whatever their place is while you're waiting for your animal to reset himself. Those are all behaviors. And depending on what your target is, what you're trying to teach, what component skill you're trying to teach, a reset may be the right thing to do. There are other times where you might get a lot of searching behavior or snapping behavior out of this. For instance, with my cattle dog, if you toss treats, she's just going to grab them out of the air. She's fast. And if I didn't want to build a lot of mouth snapping into the behavior, I would not be tossing those treats. Because whatever happens, those behaviors in C, they'll bleed back into B. They're part of that picture, part of that loop for the animal. So sometimes we find ourselves solving problems that we could have prevented just by thinking about where and how we plan to reinforce. The click doesn't end the behavior. The click is just the beginning of a new behavior sequence for the animal and for you too.
Yeah, I think that's really important to note that so for so long we've been saying, the click kind of marks when the end of that behavior, so that reinforcement comes, but it isn't. It's like a whole sequence, and there's so much happening, and including with you. I remember Patricia McConnell saying something very important. I don't know whether it was in her book, The Other End of the Leash, but she, and it really stuck with me. There are some things that these gurus, I just call them, they are, I fangirl, but she said that she really noticed when she was working with a dog that was fearful. I think this dog had shown some aggressive behavior. She said that even just the movement of her body, so even if she made a little move forward with her body, that was enough to scare that dog even more. So she realized that actually what she was doing by moving towards even just a fraction, not even moving her legs, that dog was watching her, and that caused a negative reaction. So actually just by standing up and taking, just even leaning back a tiny bit, that was information. And it was so subtle, but it had such a profound effect on the dog.
Absolutely. And you're making me think about, so one of the other things that you get out of thinking hard about reinforcement is starting to notice what emotional behavior your unclear or small behaviors may be producing in your animal. If your dog doesn't know when or where or how reinforcement will come to them, they may start to show frantic behavior that looks frustrated, behavior that we label as anxious too. They're scanning the environment. And sometimes we misread that. We go, oh, that's an anxious dog. Look, he's an anxious dog. Oftentimes when we clean up the reinforcement system there, we see that those behaviors that we were putting in the dog, they were just really a reflection and a function of our messy reinforcement system. And we can get a question too.
So let's say that is happening, right? Your dog is scanning. Your dog is frustrated. Your dog, how can you change your reinforcement? What do you do?
So the first thing that I would think about is observation. There's a larger conversation that I want to have around reinforcement, and that's about the status of behavior. So what is behavior? What is it that we're doing when we're training? Why should we care about all these little details in training? And for me, the first thing that I think of for this is that whatever the animal is doing, it matters to her. And it matters to her in the sense that it has a function. It's rational for her. Given her learning history and her current experience, this is the behavior that she has to get what she needs or want, whatever that critical consequence is, that matters to her. And so when I take it that way, and I just take it that way as an axiom, I will always treat the behavior of another as if it has a critical function for that individual. Then the first thing that I would want to know is, what are her alternatives here? What other skills does she have here to get to that, whatever that is that she is aiming for? So once we've determined the function, the next thing I would think about is teaching some other skills, assuming that those behaviors that we're talking about, that we're trying to modify, that they're costly. And what I mean by costly is they're uncomfortable for us, or they're uncomfortable for our dog, or both. Even behaviors that are costly, loud, scary, uncomfortable, they have a function too. And if we ask ourselves, what are the alternatives here? And we find that there are none for this animal, then that's when we train. And to me, that means changing my behavior in that scenario.
Now, can we pivot on to toys? I want to talk about toys. And now there's lots of people that come to me and say, my dog is not motivated by food. My dog won't take treats. And then I have to look at the environment and see, what kind of food they're using, what the environment that they're training in, because all dogs have to eat. We know that, right? Otherwise they don't live. So all dogs are actually motivated to have food, but it just might be that the environment's not set up. The treat is not exactly what they might like. And so we have to, change that up. But let's say truly, we cannot, for whatever reason, use food. What do you do then?
Yeah, and I think this is one of the ways in which a constructional approach, and I think of Jesus Rosales-Ruiz and Joe Lang here, both behavior analysts in this framework, can be really helpful. Because if the dog is behaving, then that they're doing something, then they're doing it for a critical consequence. And if that's not food, then identifying what that consequence is the first step toward giving them another way to reach that consequence. We often use food. I use food a ton in training because it's efficient and it's easy to control. But there are many times where we may not want to layer food on top of the contingencies that are already happening, even if the dog is willing to eat. So in separation anxiety work, for instance, I don't use a lot of food. I want to know, in this case, what is that dog's body language? Where is their tolerance level? What is their coping ability right now? And I don't want to muddy the waters by adding a bunch of food in there. That can make it really hard for me to see where they are in their current tolerance level of alone time. And same for that dog that's out there that says no thanks to food. I guess this is the Pony show, but I will just say that Pony didn't eat in training for the first year that I had him. He would not eat in training. And he actually struggled to eat enough calories outside of training as well. So but certainly if you had a treat pouch or if you offered him a treat in a training session, he might take it gently between his teeth, place it on the ground, and hightail out of there. He wouldn't eat it, and he wasn't interested in working for it at that moment. So the struggle is real, and I understand the frustration of being in that. But I would say that if you are working with an animal like that, instead of skipping to the tools that you know best, which for me, they're food, I would think about how can I deliver the consequence that's currently maintaining that behavior with a different skill.
I love that. Okay. If we can just focus on the food, we've talked about delivery, we've talked about the consequence, but there is obviously a debate in the dog training world that can get quite difficult at times. And there's a lot of people that say, well, I wouldn't say a lot of people, I would say probably less people now than there ever has been before, that tell people, trainers, I should say, that tell clients not to use food at all because food is bribery. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I hear that one fairly frequently still where I live. I have to say in the southeastern United States, I still hear that. I just often will let people know. So there's some strategic stuff that I might say in this case as well. But I'll often just let people know that your dog is behaving for consequences. And if you are able to control those consequences, you can change their behavior. But if you cannot control those consequences, then that loop, that contingency loop, that behavior consequence loop, you're not a part of it. You're not relevant to it. The reason I use food is because it's easy for me, not because it's the thing that, or the only thing that reinforces behavior. If that were the case, then the only dogs that would have any behavior at all would be dogs that are being fed for those behaviors. And obviously we get called into plenty of houses where there are many loud, big behaviors that animals are performing, and they've never had a reward for doing those things. So I often tell people, yeah, sure, we can do it without food, but you will have to develop a much more nuanced skill set in order to do that well without food. And in some cases, that may mean removing the animal from that environment if that consequence is something completely out of your control, like a squirrel, right? It may mean removing your animal from the environment for a long time before you're able to work back up to that environment. So I use food because it's easy, it's quick, it's clear, and it's a system that I can use to have conversations about building skills with my animals.
And I use food as well. I mean, I use toys. I use other skills as well. You know, my dogs know that if I just need them just to wait a little bit, I won't ask them to. I just know that. I mean, I'll say wait, but they know that they just have to gather themselves. And once they do, then the door opens and then they can go outside, right? So that's that life reward, as you say. So, but I do take umbrage at the fact of when people say that food is bribery, because I think it devalues the power of food. And I also like to make teaching fun. And as I said, it's easy as possible, easy for me, easy for clients, and easy for dogs. And so if there's some kind of like feel good thing at the end of it, well, then why not? I'd rather do that than use any kind of correction or punishment or corrective tool in order to get my dog to actually do something, to behave via coercion. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that kind of trainer, and I don't want to be that kind of person. Yeah. So, that's it's always an argument. And plus, I mean, we can't ignore what food does to brain chemistry as well. We can't ignore the fact when the dog is in seeking mode and seeking behavior, the anticipation of that food, what that does inside the brain as well, and how that can increase motivation and reward-driven learning and actual coordination for the way the dog moves through the space, as well as the dog feeling good about it. So I think that food has been my friend for many, many years, as well as dogs. And, for social aspects as well, we socialize over food all the time. I like to socialize with my dogs over food as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other part of that bribery conversation, the reason that people see food as potentially bribery is because they are seeing that you are delivering something for the animal behaving. But there's some confusion about how behavior happens. That there is no behavior that happens without reinforcement that's maintained anyway. It's always a function of reinforcement and punishment. So when we educate people about what behavior is, I think oftentimes their resistance to using obvious, clear consequences that are easy for them, easy for their dog, and that don't involve the emotional fallout that other consequences might, like harsh or coercive methods might have, really falls. So to me, it's also about understanding behavior. Your dog doesn't do anything because you want him to. He doesn't do anything just for the doing of it. He does it to change something in his environment. That's why he does it.
Isn't that all behavior? I mean, truly, when we're behaving in a certain way in front of somebody, aren't we trying to enhance or dissuade that person from doing that behavior? We're trying to change that person's behavior, or maybe encourage that person to respond in the way that we want that person to respond. So we're doing that all the time.
Yes, we're always influencing behavior, and it doesn't have to be manipulative either. It doesn't mean that when I'm having this conversation with you, I'm trying to get you to say a particular thing. I'm interacting with you. Mm-hmm. And that is what the training conversation to me is. It's just a physical one. So we're doing this in verbal behavior, partly, right? But not only. But we with our animals, we have a kinesthetic conversation, a conversation that happens in movement. You do something and then I do something, and then you do something and then I do something. That's a conversation too. And we're always influencing each other's behavior. My dog's behavior, of course, changes mine, and vice versa.
I see training as a dance. You're both learning the steps. And when you first start, and I tell this again to clients because I'm like, it's okay if you mess up. And that's the beauty of positive reinforcement. If you mess up, it's not going to cause any real problem to the dog or to you. But when you're first starting, it's like a dance. You're going to have to learn the steps. And whilst you're learning, you might tread on each other's toes, but it's okay, because one day it will become fluid. And then when you dance together, there's nothing better. Like your border collie. Now your border collie's out there, champion herder, but had to learn those steps, which, as you said yourself, can be hard at times. But now look where you are. The dance is working. And I'm sure it's beautiful. I'm sure it's poetry in motion when you watch.
Well, I think about, Victoria, about a metaphor from a sheepdog trainer, positive sheepdog trainer, who's really helped us, Barb Buchmeyer. She often talks about traditional training as sculpting and about positive training as ceramics or potting. And when we sculpt, what we do is we have the block of stone and we start cutting pieces off until we get the picture that we want. That's what punishment can do. We can lop off, suppress behavior, push behavior down. When we are doing positive reinforcement training, we are building behavior the way that a potter might build up a pot with molding that lump of clay. And one really nice thing about being a potter instead of a sculptor is if you lop some piece of that stone off and you want it back, it's gone. But with sculpting, when we make those mistakes, like we step on each other's toes or we find out, whoops, that isn't actually what I wanted to happen in this situation, that clay is malleable. We can rebuild it. We can go back a step. We can push it back up. So I think it's really, really friendly for trainers as well, and forgiving for both ends of the leash.
Maia, it's been amazing to talk to you. I'm so excited for your presentation after the click completing the training picture. She will be speaking at the conference. Guys, get your tickets, register April the 21st to the 23rd. You don't have to be there all 3 days live. Don't worry about it. You can come and attend and, come in and out when you need. And also, once you register and the presentations go out live, then you have one whole year to watch those presentations. So you can register at dogbehaviorconference.com. Maia, thank you so much for talking with me. I could talk to you forever, and I'm so glad you're part of VSA and Positively.
Same. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
Take care, everybody. And I knew it was going to be a fabulous podcast, and I hope it didn't disappoint, because gosh, did we just learn some stuff today. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening, and I will see you again on another episode.
Thanks for tuning in to Victoria Stilwell's Positively podcast. For Victoria's online dog training courses, more information, and helpful dog training tips, visit her official website at positively.com. Become a professional dog trainer with the Victoria Stilwell Academy at vsdogtrainingacademy.com. Get connected on Facebook, Instagram, and other social media as Victoria Stilwell, and follow her on Twitter at Victoria S. Be sure to tune in next time as Victoria helps you and your dog live your best life together. Positively.